Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Friday, December 8th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Cotton Bowl game against Missouri in 21 days, the game against Michigan in 358 days. Joined live for this special live episode with Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. We just got a chance to hear from Marvin Harrison Jr. about the Heisman Trophy, the Biletnikoff Award, his plans for the Cotton Bowl, his plans for the 2024 NFL Draft, the transfer of his former high school quarterback, Kyle McCord, former Ohio State quarterback, Kyle McCord. So many different places to start. I guess let's start with the question everyone is asking. Okay, is Marvin Harrison going to be back for the Cotton Bowl? And is Marvin Harrison going to be back for the 2024 college football season?
He doesn't know. He does know he will be at the Cotton Bowl. He's definitely going to the game. Whether or not he plays is a separate decision, but he did say
Same
he is.
here.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. He has not decided whether or not he is turning pro, and he gave some very interesting reasons as to why he is undecided.
Well, don't keep us in suspense.
Basically, he wants to beat Michigan and he wants to win the Big Ten. And somebody asked about the financial side of things, of coming back and the NIL that can help. He said financial won't be the decision. It's, do I want to come back bad enough to beat Michigan, win the Big Ten? And he didn't even say, like, the national championship is always a goal, but they haven't even made it. So he doesn't even think about that. He just is focused on beating Michigan, winning the Big Ten. Those will be the two deciding factors. And he did say, if I choose to go forward into the NFL, it's going to be something he's going to have to live with. Like, that's something he's going to take with him, because he did say, he did agree that his career is incomplete without those two things, especially having his dad play at Indianapolis for so long. The assumption when he signed with Ohio State, you play in Indianapolis every year for the Big Ten championship. He never got to do that. So there are some significant reasons why he is torn right now.
And I think the natural reaction from everyone is going to be, yeah, sure. He is not someone who has to jump to the NFL to, get his family out of grinding poverty or anything like that. That's, I think, less of a concern with NIL now. If you're at the point where you're a top 5 NFL draft pick, you're probably doing just fine with NIL in college if that's something you want to prioritize. So it's not quite as laughable as it might have seemed 10 years ago to say something like that. My default assumption is that when they, he said they really haven't sat down and talked about it yet. And my default assumption is and I'm sure, if you put Vegas odds on this, the Vegas odds for Marvin Harrison sits out the Cotton Bowl and turns pro is probably about, minus 2,500, give or take.
I was going to say 1,200, just to
1,200? Okay.
Just to be nice.
Yeah. Well, maybe if you parlay those two things together.
Yes.
But I mean, it's possible. I'm certainly not expecting it, but it's certainly possible, because with his sort of unique family situation, you do have the luxury of choosing to stay, and I'm sure he would do just fine NIL-wise if he chose to stay for another year as well. If he does choose to stay, he's going to have a different quarterback throwing to him. You asked him which quarterback that was going to be. I thought it was a great question. Rather disrespectfully, he didn't answer it. But he is, it's not going to be his former teammate and former high school teammate, former college teammate, Kyle McCord. What did he have to say about Kyle McCord's transfer?
Obviously said it's sad to see him go, and he's going to continue to support him wherever he goes, and a friend for life, that sort of thing. And he said the same thing. I mean, they've been through a ton together over the years, and they've always been close. And Marvin said many times before, he's my quarterback, he's my friend, and that's obviously going to continue on past this. And yes, I did ask him who's going to be the quarterback next year, and he said he didn't know. I don't know if he's lying to us now. Which of these lies from Marvin are truly lies? We don't know. But hey, you got to shoot your shot, so to speak,
Sure.
and see what he's going to say. But I don't know that anybody knows that question, so it's not an unfair question. No, don't worry about that. It was totally fair. But yeah, obviously going to miss Kyle McCord, and but that's the way of life now in college football. And he talked about everybody has to make their own decision that is best for them in their individual situations. And that's what's going on. Somebody asked about, what does it say about the culture? And he's like, basically, players just have to decide what's best for them and head towards that.
Right. And, I think with Kyle McCord leaving, you wonder if you go back to, it was the 2021 season, Kyle McCord played in 5 games that year. If Kyle McCord had played in 4 games and had 2 years of eligibility left, you might be having a whole different conversation right now than you would have, than you are with 2024 being his last season, because you want to be guaranteed the starting spot. Because if it's your last season, you want to be the starter, because you don't want to go into your last season with the potential of the NFL draft and all that kind of stuff coming up at, 16 months from now. You don't want to go into the 2024 season with uncertainty, because this is something he's worked his whole life for. So it's, from his end of things, it's understandable. I think, everyone can say that this is like, oh boy, everything's going to hell right now. And I think you're seeing people making the exact same decisions they would have made 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago if that was an option, if you had the option to transfer and not have to sit out a year. I don't think this is a kids these days thing as much as a college football has changed, and that's sort of one of those realities of that situation.
Yeah, I think this is the world we're living in now. So you just have to stop trying to make excuses for it or demonize it. It is here now. It is what it is. Tom, I want to know, the team up north kept being brought up, and how much do you think the Roman Wilson comments bothered Marvin Harrison? And I just thinking about this after the interview session, that would have been a good question to ask, but I wasn't thinking about that, about $1,000 suits or whatever being soft, that sort of thing. Like, clearly, that's not going to be something that is agreeable to Marvin Harrison.
No, it's certainly not going to be agreeable. It's certainly not the deciding factor either. I mean, this is something where he's, very obviously, you come to Ohio State and the goals are, there's a big wall inside the facility with pictures of Ohio State and Michigan, and there's a countdown clock. It's very clear this is a big point of emphasis, and if the game is going to be a point of emphasis, well, you might as well go out and win it every once in a while. That's nothing new. And they have stuff on the walls for all the Big Ten champions, and boy, they haven't had to update that in a while. And all of, this is all stuff that's sort of built into the Ohio State football program, and stuff that was sort of being taken for granted. I keep looking up at, right above our heads is the 2019 Big Ten champions banner, and there's a 2020 Big Ten champions banner around here somewhere, and then there's a bunch of blank wall. And I think that the annual win over Michigan, the annual trip to Indianapolis, the annual win in Indianapolis, and the confetti and all that kind of stuff, they didn't even get confetti the last time.
That's right.
COVID.
They didn't even get the Big Ten logo or Ohio State logos on there, did they? No.
So, I can tell you, when we were in Indianapolis in 2019 and the confetti was falling, I did not think, well, I bet something crazy is about to happen in about 3 months. And then something else crazy is about to happen, and Ohio State's not going to have confetti for at least the next 4 football seasons for various reasons. But this is something where you could see this being something that would be enough of a draw. And there was a question in the chat about whether, first of all, there's a chat from Jordan Kapler about whether I can enter the transfer portal. No, my eligibility was exhausted decades ago.
Plus, there has to be interest.
Well, no, there doesn't have to be interest to enter. There has to be interest to enter to leave. There was a question about the chances that Emeka Egbuka stays, and that's that I think there's a much more logical argument beyond just, not that there's not logic behind the idea that Marvin Harrison could decide to stay, but Emeka Egbuka, in terms of a personal interest, in terms of a draft stock thing, Marvin Harrison's draft stock is not going to get materially better 12 months from now. Emeka Egbuka's could. So, what are the chances Emeka Egbuka stays? Better than Marvin Harrison, I would say. Yeah. But, is that a coin flip to you? Is that better than a coin flip to you?
Well, I think there are a number of factors. He had half the numbers he did last year, but obviously injuries were the main factor there in the quarterback situation. I think one factor is, does he want to come back and show that he can be an outside receiver? And maybe move him into the top 10? Because if you are just a slot receiver, then your draft slot is probably closer to Jackson Smith and Jigba, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we also saw what Jackson Smith-Njigba did as a sophomore, and obviously missed his junior season, but it ended up being, the 24th pick, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to be closer to the 10th pick, like Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave at number 12? Or are you okay not even knowing if you are going to be in that top 24-ish range, because you did miss some of the season and your numbers did decline and there were some drops? And so am I cautiously optimistic that he's going to return? It seems foolish to say that about any of these juniors making a decision, but I don't expect all of them to go. I think they're going to get a few back.
Yeah, I don't want to necessarily put a final pick in on that stuff, but if you're just kind of going through Travion Henderson, Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Ibuka, Cade Stover. I mean, Cade Stover could have another year, right? I think. Technically, I believe he could.
Because 19 he redshirted, 20 was obviously COVID. So.
Yeah, I think he could technically come back. If you're going to kind of give me,
like Tommy Eichenberg could technically come back.
Yeah, and he's declared for the NFL or for the Senior Bowl, but that's not, like an NFL draft declaration where you can't take it back. I think you've got a lot of those guys that I'm not going to say this guy's coming back, but you've sort of heard some rumblings that this guy or that guy might come back. So, if you're asking me to parlay all of these guys are going to the NFL draft, I don't think that cashes, but I don't necessarily want to say this guy and this guy are both coming back for sure. So all right, so that's that. Let's touch real quickly on what Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be doing this weekend. He's going to New York City and going to get to wear a fancy suit. Roman Wilson will get to watch him on TV, and he will be a finalist for the Heisman Trophy. He brought up the idea. He was asked, who would your vote be for? And man, this is great media training. Well, I'm going to be around all these guys. I don't really want to, which is like, that is tremendous media training right there. But this is a great honor for him. He's up for the Blitnikoff Award. He's up for the Heisman this week. Whether he wins the Heisman or not, this is 6 guys. 6 years in a row, Ohio State has had Heisman finals, which is wild. That has to be the longest streak I would think of in history, because they didn't used to do Heisman finalists. That's a relatively new thing. So I would assume that's got to be the longest streak of 6 years in a row having a Heisman finalist. But this is something he was very excited about, and he talked about won't be the first time he's been to New York either.
Well, no, and the first time he was in New York, talking about how he went with his dad and probably the rest of his family to New York when they were waiting for the Pro Football Hall of Fame call, and they did not get it. So there's bittersweet memories of New York. Now, I don't think he expects to win the Heisman on Saturday. So this, to me, is one of those truthful answers where it's just an honor to be nominated, because you are the lone non-quarterback, and honestly, that should be an award in itself. You are like Aiden Hutchinson the one year, or Chase Young in 2019. If you are the lone non-quarterback, that should be another award. Like, they should give the Heisman, and then here is the lone, the highest-ranking non-quarterback. You are the otherwise player of the year, and so there is definitely some pride that he takes with that. And the Blitnikoff, talking about all of the Ohio State wide receivers. And I tweeted out last year when he didn't win, like, all of the names from Ohio State's wide receivers that have never won the award. The only one being Terry Glenn in 1995. And there's a long list of names there, and I fully expect him to win the Blitnikoff. I think he should have won it last year. Jalen Hyatt had some tremendous numbers, but I think you look back and you realize the wrong decision was made, and now maybe this is a chance to right it wrong. Even though, like, Malik Neighbors, there's some dudes who have put up some big numbers this year as well, but I expect him to win that one.
Well, and the kid from Washington too has had a great season and has made some incredible plays. This feels a little like 10 years from now, if Marvin Harrison doesn't win the Blitnikoff Award, you're going to look back and go, wait, what? Like, this can be one of those, like, bar trivia things.
Yeah.
That, how many times did Marvin Harrison Jr. win the Blitnikoff Award? And the choices will be 0, 1, 2, or 3, and no one will pick 0 because everyone will go, well, that's not possible.
Well, I remember when Ted Ginn Jr. and Adrian Peterson both came into college the same year, 2004, And I don't think anybody would have bet that neither one of those guys was going to win a Heisman in their 6 combined years in college football.
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna run through a couple questions real quick. Drowsy Dragon says Chris Olave stayed. Sometimes it happens. I mean that can happen. Again, I think more likely that you see Emeka Egbuka come back than Marvin Harrison.
That's maybe the more apt comparison because Olave was a fringe first rounder in 2021 when he was a junior, Tom.
Yeah, 2020. Yeah.
So he was a fringe first rounder, came back and turned that into the 12th pick overall, and that's really, I think, where Emeka's decision frame, the range finder, is for him.
Yeah. Aaron Taylor wants to know who is QB1 in practice right now. We don't know that officially. I think my assumption would be, based on the guys who are on the roster and based on how the depth chart has shook out so far this year, I would certainly assume Devin Brown is QB1 right now. You're probably, I would guess, going to see both guys in the Cotton Bowl, because as much as they want it to be, Brian Day talked about this, job one is winning the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah.
Well, job 1A is start to figure out the 2024 quarterback situation. And, they could very easily have a transfer quarterback, signed and committed before that game happens, and that sort of changes the conversation around the 2024 quarterback position. They could very well not take a transfer quarterback at all. And then that makes, that's a different conversation about the Cotton Bowl and the 2024 position.
Yeah, and they're so early right now in practice that there's probably a 1A and a 1B. You're splitting up the reps pretty evenly, I would assume. And then once you get into game planning and then the week of practice out there, it's going to be more maybe 70-30 type of thing.
And generally, this early part of bowl prep, even in a college football playoff year, you're playing more of your younger guys. You're getting your younger guys some more run. So I would bet, Carnell Tate is probably getting more run. Noah Rogers maybe. Some of the younger receivers, some of the younger Jelani Thurman, all those kind of guys. I think you're probably getting more run from them as, the older guys, give them a little extra time to heal up and all that, and see what you got with some of the younger guys. Because even in a college football playoff year, there's a certain amount of take a little peek forward that you get with bowl practices.
Yep, I agree. Tom, next question.
Mika Hanna wants to know, does Ohio State offer Carter Smith, of course, the transfer offensive lineman, an Olentangy High School, one of the Olentangy High Schools, and now I forget which one.
Tom, come on, there's only 19 of them.
This is your neighborhood. That's not mine. I can tell you which Granville High School player went to. Olentangy, that's your problem. One of the Olentangys, he ended up, I'm going to say Liberty and make you tell me I'm wrong. Olentangy Liberty, let's say. He then went to Indiana. Took a redshirt season, started in the 2023 season as a tackle, as a redshirt freshman, entered the transfer portal. Ohio State has, there has been, Mark Givler has talked about the fact there's certainly been communication there. I don't know if they currently have an offer out to him or not. I think, if I was going to put in a transfer portal crystal ball, Olentangy Liberty, Tony, had it the whole way.
Look at this guy.
Look at that. An Olentangy expert. If I had a crystal ball to put in, I would say Ohio State for Carter Smith, but I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't have to say that.
Dang, yeah, I would agree. It's almost to the point where I've almost moved past him because I just assume that he's going to be part of the team next year, and that's the fun part about the transfer portal, when you already have the guys in and you don't even know if they're coming yet.
Next one. This is, I think, a little bit of a misconception from Rusty Jesse. What about the reports of limiting NIL to $30,000? This is the show that Tony and I did earlier in the week, and it's not quite what the proposal was. The proposal was from NCAA President Charlie Baker, and this was just basically this is not an official NCAA proposal yet. It's just like a proposal for a proposal, and the idea was splitting off, offering schools the opportunity to split off, so it's not just 133 FBS schools, but there, a separate subdivision where you could pay, you would have to put at least $30,000 in a trust every year, for athletes. So that wouldn't be limiting NIL. That would be the school putting at least $30,000, and there would not be a limit on it.
And it would only be for half. Like
yes, yeah, for
half
at least half of the athletes would have to comply with Title IX. It's a very complicated thing. Tony and I did a whole show about it 2 days ago that you should be able to find on the YouTube channel.
I would view it more of like just anteing up, and it has nothing to do with the actual bidding of the hands going on.
Yeah. Mika wants to know, is it possible the NCAA won't do anything to Michigan? I'm worried. I think that the odds that there is no further action taken against Michigan are functionally zero. I think there's been a lot of confusion on a couple different points. One is I haven't heard anything. There was all this flurry of activity, and then I haven't heard anything for a couple weeks. Does that mean it's over? No. The flurry of activity was the Big Ten trying to figure out any kind of in-season punishment that it felt was necessary or worthwhile. That was the punishment that you had come out where Jim Harbaugh was suspended for 3 games.
Which Michigan agreed with.
Michigan
chose not to appeal.
Chose not to appeal for whatever reason. Not to be confused with the self-imposed 3-game suspension for Jim Harbaugh at the beginning of the season.
Which is also not settled.
Yes. So the NCAA has the case from last spring, which you have seen sort of shorthanded as hamburgers, which actually is COVID visitation rule violations and that kind of stuff. Harbaugh has served a 3-game self-imposed suspension. That is still an open matter for the NCAA. That is likely going to get combined with this current case with we're just going to call it the Connor Stallions thing because we're going to shorthand everything here. That all is still to come in terms of what is going to happen. The NCAA, that's an ongoing investigation. Then the NCAA has to issue a notice of allegations to Michigan that officially, it's basically an official document saying we think you did all this, and here's what we can prove, basically. And then Michigan has 90 days to respond to that, and then the NCAA can issue a punishment after that. So you're going to have probably, if and when the notice of allegation comes out, which is probably early 24, say Q1 of 2024 at some point, then at that point, you'll hear sort of have another flurry of activity, and then Michigan has 90 days to address that, and then you'll have another flurry of activity. This is going to drag out, and I know Ohio State fans are going, why, when are we going to get to the fireworks factory? And in reality, this is, the sword of Damocles hanging over Michigan's head. Is Jim Harbaugh going to be there? Sherrone Moore, remember, served a self-imposed 1-game suspension back in September as well. So, the plug and play, we'll just put this guy in here, how sure are you that he's not going to be facing some kind of, additional whatever? How much does that impact what they're able to do in the portal? How much does that impact what they're able to do in recruiting? All this stuff is still sort of hanging out there. This is all going to be like a 2024 conversation at this point.
Well, and remember, is COVID stuff, as you said. Remember how long ago the COVID stuff was, and it's still being dealt with.
All right, so let's see. We've got lots of surly Michigan folks in the chat. We're just going to clean this up right now. Always believe in Alabama with a photo of Nick Saban holding the trophy in a nearly empty, it was a Hard Rock Stadium at that point. Tony and I were 2 of the, 15,000 or so people there for that one. Who are you guys picking, Bama or Michigan? I kind of feel like I want to wait and let that game get a little closer before I make any sort of official pick. I did think it was rather notable, the video of Michigan. Yeah. When Michigan was announced, Michigan cheered very loudly. When Alabama was announced, I think they were expecting not Alabama to be their opponent, and there was, I said there was like this audible gasp, and people were like, that wasn't an audible gasp. But it was like, how would you describe the reaction on that video?
Audible groan?
No one yelled bet. There was not a lot of clapping. I mean, whatever it was, the point spread is like very, very close right now, I know. So yeah, I think that's going to be probably a pretty good game.
I think the Final Four looks very interesting to me. Should be. Now it's been a while since, I don't know if it's ever happened where you have 3 good games out of the CFP. Maybe this will be the first year.
People wondering why so many people are leaving Ohio State, like so many guys are transferring out. How many players that have hit the transfer portal were material contributors in 2023? I've got Kyle McCord, Chip Trainum, and
Julian
Fleming. That's it, right?
And you'd have what is Jair Brown? No, but he played like 3 or 4 games. So
right.
Like,
yeah.
He's like that next tier.
Yeah.
I think, and I've said this before. You lose a third-year quarterback, which is the norm at Ohio State. You lose a senior receiver, which is the norm. So those are losses that you expect to have once you recruit these guys. But everybody else, and again, I'll say that as much as people leave on their own, they're being told to leave.
Yeah.
And that's around the country. Maybe even more so, they're being told to leave. So the only guy in there on this group that had start was Jair Brown. Cam Martinez had a couple of starts a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And there weren't going to be any starts for Cam Martinez in his future. And I don't know that anybody else that they lost, like the biggest losses in there, I don't know that there were any in terms of they were going to be contributing next year. Jair Brown, I think, is a guy that could have played, but he had been passed by a freshman and Jermaine Matthews.
Two freshmen, really, including Calvin Simpson-Hunt.
Right,
I mean,
and he was picking up steam as well, yeah.
Towards the end of the year, you sort of started to see guys who were younger suddenly appearing in games before some of the guys who were older. I think Kai Stokes was sort of in that same boat as well. That's sort of been the pattern. And, well, why hasn't this happened at Michigan yet? Because is this a culture thing? Well, they're still playing.
Right.
If you have the opportunity to potentially win a national championship, there's no reason to jump in the portal yet. If you're thinking, well, I'm not going to play in the Cotton Bowl, I want to get a head start, you jump in the portal. That's the difference.
I saw somebody link a story of the top 25 teams and the number of players already in the portal. Obviously, the top 4 teams have the fewest names in the portal because they're still playing. Mm-hmm. Maybe like 6 total, and some guys leave because we know we're not. I know I'm not going to play, so I'm going to jump in, and then everybody else is like between 7 and 13, and there's nobody that is clean. I think Michigan is the only team right now without anybody in the portal in the top 25.
Yeah.
But again, you are playing in playoffs, so.
Right, yeah. The year that Ohio State was in the playoffs and Michigan wasn't in, 2020 or whenever it was, there were like 25 Michigan guys in the portal and no one for Ohio State until after the whole thing.
Yeah, I think the number I saw, 22 guys from Michigan in the portal at one of those years.
Yeah.
I will also say, Michigan does a real good job of playing a ton of guys.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these guys that are going to be transferring at some point have played this year for Michigan because they do play a bunch of guys.
Paul Wall says Manny Diaz, the DC for Penn State, will be the head coach at Duke. I know he was discussed. I think the framing was, he's the favorite, or has sort of emerged as the favorite. Mm-hmm. The relevance to Ohio State there, of course, is that Jim Knowles was someone else who was interviewed there.
Also, Manny Diaz going away from Penn State is probably a good thing for Ohio State too, depending on who they bring in.
Depending on who
Don Brown,
perhaps. Depending on who they bring in. But I mean, this is again now Penn State will, if this is how this plays out, Penn State will have lost both of their coordinators again, because Mike Yurcich was invited to take his talents to South Beach, and Manny Diaz, if he leaves, you've lost your offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator again. This feels like 2024 might be one of those sort of defining seasons for James Franklin. Like you're getting to a spot where you've got 2 choices, and one of them is get off the pot, and that's going to be a season with a lot of new stuff. It would probably be in James Franklin's best interest to win some football games.
They went and got Kansas's offensive coordinator, if I recall, and I think he won some sort of offensive coordinator award by somebody. So I think that's a pretty good hire. We'll see what they do there. I don't think they'll be bringing Jalen Daniels with him, since you've got Drew Aller.
You've got Drew Aller, yeah. But I mean, if you've watched Kansas runs a fun offense, like a fun, interesting, that just looks like, that's probably a real pain in the butt to try and see.
As opposed to Mike Yurcich's very boring offense.
Yeah. Just see. Else. I think we're caught up on the questions I'm interested in answering. So I think we are good to go.
Nothing from Jordan Kapler?
Well, we addressed his question earlier. Yeah, well, he said earlier that he has been wrong a lot this year. So he's going to say that Marv is going to the NFL.
Oh, so there you go.
He said some things recently that I thought were very wrong, but that's neither here nor there.
I have not seen him say anything wrong yet this year, or the past 2 or 3 years, in fact. Anyway.
So that will do it for now. Appreciate you guys hopping on with us for a little post interview live session. We will be back next Tuesday, I believe, is the plan. Talk to some Ohio State players, possibly Ohio State coaches. We're not sure right now. They are out on the road right now doing some recruiting. So it is, kind of this is always kind of an awkward time of year in the building because you've got a bunch of people on the road trying to do in-home visits, trying to seal things up, close things up for the end of the recruiting cycle, and then you're trying to get things also set for the bowl game. You got the transfer portal stuff going on. This is a busy time of year at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. It is also a busy time of year at BuckeyeHuddle.com, where we have a fantastic team of insiders covering the team. We've got Mark Givler covering recruiting. He's been very, very busy. Got Ross and Devin and Mickey and Justin covering X's and O's, making you a smarter football fan. A very fun and active community on the Huddle Board, presented by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse. We'll have Ross back on the show tomorrow, doing a little bit of a schematic breakdown and breaking down Ohio State's defensive performance against Michigan. And if you want to see that episode with all the video clips from the games, you can do that on the Huddle Board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That is a member-exclusive feature, one of many reasons to consider joining BuckeyeHuddle.com today. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.